Somebody sent me a poem today. He meant it kindly, I'm sure. He just hadn't noticed the dog whistles that it contained, the straw man arguments and false equivocations that make him and others think their freedom of expression really is at risk from those of us on the left. He didn't know that white privilege doesn't mean we have no problems, just that we don't have problems of discrimination, biased legal processes and race hatred to deal with as well. He didn't know that cancel culture isn't supported by the majority of left-wingers, and that most of us would rather hear and expose far-right arguments and drive them underground, where they fester, and gain strength like some awful cancer in the tissues of society's dark places. He didn't know that we realise not only that people have a right to state their opinions, but also that we value our right to hear them. That's how we all grow, by sharing ideas, even the stupid ones. He didn't understand that almost nobody blames modern white people for slavery, nor does he realise that most of us disagree with the destruction of monuments. That's why he sent it to me, I think. He sincerely thought that the video contained a reasonable argument against left-wing and liberal politics. That, well-meaning though I'm sure he was, and is, he's a really nice bloke as it happens. There really is another side to all this. This videoed poem misrepresented the left whilst pretending to be neutral. It featured a working-class white man, a man presumably with a background and culture very much like myself in many respects. A man who clearly wanted to be seen as a representative of my community. But his populist tropes, which misrepresented and then criticised ridiculous, extreme exaggerations of the ideas of the left, yet never mentioned a single far-right problem, was far too transparent for my tastes. The poem he recited, "The Right to Hate," repeats many of the tired old slogans and tropes from far-right ideologues, deceitful right-wing assertions that have long since been exposed as the blatant lies they always were. The exaggerated assumptions and equivocations he spoke about only make sense if you don't actually think about the reality beyond the stereotype. He implied that tasteless humour is on the same level as hate speech and incitement, without ever actually being honest enough to say so explicitly. Despite his clear opposition to the politics of decency, he never stopped to go into detail to justify any of the assertions and equivocations he presented so passionately. It was just one discredited headline trope after another, without any substance to back up his false equivocations and straw man arguments. He equated left-wingers with globalists without acknowledging that the global trend at present is to move further and further to the right. Our own Tory government is leading that charge as it happens, and fascism is rearing its ugly head all across the globe. He claims that liberal-minded lefties like me demand that he like trans, where for most of us the decision is much simpler. We think it's reasonable to accept people, but most of us, like myself, are very open about the fact that whilst it's not something we would like, I don't even understand, we can still accept people for who they are without feeling the need to insult, ostracise or demean them simply for being different. The difference between the left and the far right here is simply that we lefties don't take such an unhealthy interest in other people's preferences and needs. He claimed that working people aren't able to speak their mind. Ironically enough, whilst he speaks his own mind on social media. He even pretends to be worried about censorship, but there's no evidence of that. He admits that the poem is 2 years old, and makes no mention of any censorship of it in all that time. You can bet your life that if it had been quashed even once in the last couple of years, he'd have mentioned it. That's the key, you see, with these false flag dog whistles from the far right. Listen to what they don't say, what you'd expect them to say. Ask yourself, if this were true, wouldn't they have told us about it? If this poem had been taken down even once, don't you think he might have said so? He will never represent me, any more than Nick Griffin, the sometime leader of the British National Party, did. It was Griffin claiming years ago to speak for working class white people that first prompted me to stand up and be counted. These people don't speak for me, nor do they speak for the working class culture I grew up in. That's why they won't be clearer about their claims. The more you look at the arguments of the far right, the less convincing they become. So they hide behind sound bites and slogans, but shy away from actual detail, like the superficial, rabble-rousing bigots they really are. This hyperbolic poem would have been funny had it not been so dangerous. The final part of the poem is a clear call to action, a dog whistle, calling for people like me to be attacked, ostensibly, and I would argue dishonestly. He's calling for all people, black, white, Christian, Jew, Muslim, etc., to unite and take a stand. But we all know that the only ones to respond will be far-right thugs, those hypocritical scumbags who claim to defend freedom of speech, but actually work hard to intimidate, assault, or even kill those who disagree with them. These are the real enemies of freedom of speech. These are the real threats to our democracy. Don't be fooled. On one level, this poem is an impassioned plea for fairness and freedom of speech. That's the thing that my friend saw. But below it, there's a very sinister incitement for more right-wing violence, whilst claiming it's not a poem of hate. Yeah, right.